I want you to think right now of a film that makes you feel cozy. What comes to mind? Warmth, probably. Blankets, tea sipping. Perhaps a lovely pet that snuggles up against you, pressing their soft, warm fur against the underside of your arms as you cradle a mug of Earl Grey between your interlocked fingers. The warmth spreading across those tips. What do you have on the TV? What are you basking in the glow of? Comfortable under your den of blankets. It's nice, right? Well, do you think about this?
Let's begin.
I feel that there are certain horror movies that are out there that radiate a cozy aura, even when they're deliberately trying to make you uncomfortable. And sure, maybe I'm just a weirdo who likes this sort of stuff. But seriously, some horror movies just radiate cozy vibes. Now, this isn't to say that all horror is cozy. God, no. There is very little cozy about movies like Saw with its every city hellscape, or Martyrs with everything that happens in Martyrs. There are a few horror films out there that are just easy to watch after a rough day. And rather than make a formal video essay this week that dives into the topic of horror, I'm thinking I'm going to gush about a few horror films I like, and a book, and a game, maybe, that I find particularly cozy, especially as we go into the autumn months.
I bid you welcome.
This is an easy starter, but Universal's monster films are a go-to for me for the comfort they offer. A lot of people find black and white films soothing, and I'm one of them. The way that the lack of color, I think, actually adds to the film, it always looks elegant and classy, but there's something extra soothing about the Universal monster cycle in particular. Like, from Dracula's sleepy London to the Transylvanian countryside to the German-inspired Frankenstein and Wolfman sets, I just adore these films so much. And when you think of the Halloween aesthetic, these films come to mind, because you have your Gothic manors, you have your black cats, you have your castles, you have your monsters. This is Halloween pre-Halloween. I think of all of them, the Wolfman has the best small village, complete with those cozy boutique storefronts, these big old mansions, and the foggy forests. The fog, especially in the Wolfman, is incredible. Like every scene, it's like fog pouring in from a fog machine just off camera. There are a lot of tropes that haven't aged well in the Wolfman, like the fetishization of the Romani people, and Larry Talbot's, how do we put this, charming voyeurism. But even with those dated elements, the film really is one of those, like, masterworks in werewolf cinema. And it's something I watch every year alongside the original 3 Frankenstein films. Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, and Son of Frankenstein. And I also watch Young Frankenstein with that, which I kind of see as an unofficial 4th film in that trilogy, but I digress. Especially Bride. Like, how many other movies are out there where you have a guy in a crypt who's drinking wine with a bunch of skulls?
Oh, I thought I was alone.
It's fantastic. It's campy. I love it. And I mean, if we want to talk about great vibes, I guess the Hammer horror films sometimes hit that mark, though not nearly as hard for me. Listen, I love the Gothic castles and those Technicolor laboratories, but most of Hammer's films are in those British office rooms or bedrooms that feel kind of interchangeable. Like half the sets, you couldn't distinguish. If I showed you a set from one of Hammer's Dracula films and one of Hammer's Frankenstein films, there's no distinction. Meanwhile, with Universal, I'll show you a Dracula castle, I'll show you a Frankenstein lab, you know the difference. I just think that while Hammer does hit harder with the lurid details, if you know what I'm saying, Universal's films just feel more elegant in a way, which is funny because they're not British, but I digress.
I'm Vincent Price, and you're invited to my party in the house on Haunted Hill, where so far the ghosts have murdered only 7 people. So won't you come and make it 8?
Another real cozy regular watch for me every Halloween is House on Haunted Hill. Again, black and white, love it, but with that Gothic aesthetic, you know, and it has bisexual icon Vincent Price as the main character.
Once the door is locked, there's no way out. The windows have bars that a jail would be proud of, and the only door to the outside locks like a vault. There's no electricity, no phone, no one within miles, so no way to call for help.
Vincent Price always adds something to any film he's in. He is legitimately a great actor. I mean, see Witchfinder General if you don't believe me.
And you will be withdrawn from the water and hanged by the neck until you are dead.
But he always adds in a taste of the theatrics whenever he shows up. It's kind of disappointing that he wasn't in Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas, because that would have elevated the film, I think, a lot. Vincent Price was going to play Santa Claus in Nightmare Before Christmas, but he had just lost his wife, and the sadness could be heard in his voice. So Tim Burton tossed all the recordings out. It's a shame, because I think he would have been really good, though of course Tim Burton was the director who directed Vincent Price last in Edward Scissorhands. By the way, Vincent Price also loved cooking, and he wrote this cookbook with one of his wives where they went across Europe, ate at a bunch of restaurants, and asked for their menus. It's just a beautiful book, and if you own it, cook something from it and sit down with House on Haunted Hill. I own this book. I kind of love this book. Anyway, it's honestly not scary at all, save for a couple really effective jump scares for the 50s. The film's tropey as hell. It feels like something that a TV tropes writer would make if they want to be a little self-aware, but you can tell the actors are in on the joke, which is not always the case with some films. This is a cliche fest, but they ham it up and play their part to the best of their abilities. It's absolutely charming from start to finish, and I love it. If you want to see more with Vincent Price, I also recommend The Abominable Dr. Phibes, which is in many ways a precursor to the Saw films, with elaborate death traps and lavishly beautiful sets. Dr. Phibes is a revenge story that draws from biblical plagues and theatrical operatics in a way that is beautiful, and the Technicolor sets and design are just... oh, it's beautiful. You don't see things like this anymore. This kind of movie that embraces the artificiality of film, but also seems to show Vincent Price at arguably his most absurd, despite the fact he never even opens his mouth in the whole film. You have to see the film to understand what I'm talking about.
My dad gave it to me.
But there are a few things to keep in mind.
Gremlins is one of two horror films I love watching right after Halloween leading into the Christmas months that hits that real cozy vibe and also hits a good spooky vibe. Now, Spielberg produced this, and you can tell it really screams that cozy Amblin vibe. If you know Amblin from the 80s and 90s, this is all that. But Joe Dante also brings a lot of darkness to the humor, and there's a lot of humor. The town is just so picturesque and amazing, and you feel like it's something out of a Christmas card. But you're also waiting for these gremlins just to wreck it up. Almost something a little different there. And I love the family in this. The dad's this inventor, and none of his inventions work, and it's always a little goofy what he's going to pull out next. I love the dog. I love the house. It just feels like a perfect suburban house. The scene where the mom kicks ass in that kitchen is just one of the best. I love it. Apparently, the original plan in Chris Columbus's script, yes, Mrs. Doubtfire and Harry Potter's Chris Columbus, was to just have the gremlins take the mom's head off and dribble it like a basketball, and I think they made the right call not doing that. It was honestly the best choice to lighten Gremlins up, because I don't think I'd like the film as much if it was as dark as Chris Columbus originally intended. The film works better with levity, and there's nothing more lighthearted than seeing the gremlins just goof around. Seeing them at the town pub, or going to see Snow White at the cinemas. It's just a bunch of little guys having fun, and I love it. Sure, yeah, they cause some chaos and a few murders here or there. And, you know, Gizmo is such a great, lovable character, and I love the humans in that, but the film doesn't work if the gremlins aren't funny as anything else. I'd be remiss if I didn't also bring up a few horror comedies at this point as well, including Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Young Frankenstein, Ghostbusters, Evil Dead 2, Dead Alive. I would even include movies like Megan in this section as well.
If this movie doesn't make your skin crawl, it's on too tight.
This is the other surprisingly cozy film for me, which is surprising because it's so bleak and genuinely unsettling. I find it funny how the most recent remake of Black Christmas doesn't have as profound a scene as the one where the main character decides to get an abortion and she stays firm on her decision despite her boyfriend's less than positive response.
Peter, you're not going to tell me what I can and cannot do.
I think that scene shows a lot of restraint, and it's honestly sad that this scene is still so profoundly powerful 50 years later.
And I told you about some of the things that I wanted to do. I still want to do those things. You can't ask me to drop everything I've been working for and give up all my ambitions because your plans have changed.
And the remake of Black Christmas, by the way, was a feminist reimagining of a story that was already very feminist and progressive. I think their heart was in the right place. I just think the execution was lacking. But the original is the best by far. But also, this film screams two things I love: cozy Christmas atmosphere and cozy college campus vibes. I love how the girls are all just that. They're girls. They're people with dimensions and flaws. They're not all, like they look, they're all beautiful people, but they look realistically beautiful as opposed to say supermodel beautiful. That makes sense? I mean, Margot Kidder's in this. She's fantastic as always. They're people with flaws, especially Margot Kidder. I think one of the most disturbing scenes is early on where the one girl's father, he's waiting for his daughter to show up, and we know the daughter has been killed off. She's propped up against the window of the sorority house, and she stays there for the whole movie. But we're just seeing him wait. He's checking his watch. He's just standing there. And then we cut to him going to the sorority house with the sorority mother, who's this one of the most ridiculous alcoholics I've ever seen in film. And he's just looking around the room, seeing all these hippie posters and these, the sorority mother trying to hide the poster with the bare butts on the back. It's great. It's so funny, but it's like a subtle humor. Not subtle. It's not subtle at all, but it's like a soft humor versus the soft dread we felt. And it doesn't tug too hard in either direction, but it just tugs the right amount so that the relief we feel is actually needed. Black Christmas also has those old school Christmas song vibes, the Christmas carols where they have almost sounds like a church choir singing. For whatever reason, I associate that more with Christmas than, say, Mariah Carey. I know it's a controversial take, but what are you gonna do? Black Christmas is one of the greatest slashers of all time, and the fact it's also so cozy throughout makes the slashing all the more effective.
In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill.
Alright, let's shift gears with one of the weirder ones. I find the original 4 Silent Hill games surprisingly cozy. I know, there's the whole chains and the grotesque monstrosities going around, and there's Pyramid Head going around doing his thing, but hear me out in this one, right? Hear me out. Silent Hill takes place in a sleepy, foggy town. And as a resident of New Jersey, anytime I see fog, I think of those early mornings where you'd wake up before school as the clouds settle in. Sounds feel more distant and louder with the fog. A car can come by, and you'd see the headlights in the fog, and you wouldn't know exactly how far away it is. And the sounds just sound differently. So the tires and the ground and the gravel, it feels like it's echoing off the front of buildings. Everything feels a little removed from you. And for me, Silent Hill is that vibe. It's meant to feel familiar but empty. And the intention is to feel lonely and isolated, but honestly, because I'm a bit of an early bird anyway, I kind of dig that early empty town vibe. It reminds me of when I wake up a little too early, like when I'm filming this video at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I have nothing else to do. I just have a cup of coffee, and I sit down and watch the clouds roll in. And frankly, as someone who isn't a trained combatant, the idea of playing a character who fairly sucks at fighting is so relatable. Every one of these characters is flailing around with like a lead pipe against these grotesque monsters. And yes, I am going to take this opportunity to remind you that PT came out a decade ago, and Konami dropped that ball hard. How do you get Kojima, Guillermo del Toro, Norman Reedus, Junji Ito all in a room, and you're like, actually, we'll make pachinko machines instead? I have no idea. I'm still mad about this. And I'm also to remind you that Team Silent heavily drew from another horror film that, yes, we're talking about next.
Get me out of here. There is no out of here.
I love Jacob's Ladder. I genuinely adore it. I don't find it particularly scary. I don't know if I ever really did. Honestly, I find it more almost spiritually validating. I'm not going to spoil the film or its ending. Well, actually, I am going to. Spoiler alert ahead, here's your only warning. The movie does something that most horror films really try to avoid. They make a truly scary, abstract concept less scary by exploring it. Now, I'm serious. I'm going to spoil the end of this movie. If you're not gone yet, time code. Go there. Really? Watch Jacob's Ladder. That's my only point. But are you ready for this? Okay. The idea of the film is that Jacob Singer, the main character, is dead. He died in Vietnam, and the whole film is basically him in purgatory. And they are these entities that may be devils, they may be angels, we're not quite sure which, if either, that are trying to force Jacob to confront that he's dead throughout the film by slowly demolishing and destroying the components of his life, giving him answers to the unanswered questions that led to his death, as well as his deepest regrets, and isolating him from the elements that keep him attached to the physical world. The film builds tension extremely well, but a lot of that tension kind of fades away when Danny Aiello's character, another New Jersey guy, comes in to tell Jacob exactly what's happening in the film.
He said the only thing that burns in hell is the part of you that won't let go of your life. But they're not punishing you, he said. They're freeing your soul.
And it's a little ham-fisted, but the scenes that follow recontextualize everything.
If you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away.
Featuring Jacob walking around the city, getting answers he seeks, and just basking in the realization that everything is about to come to an end, and that he's okay with it. There's scenes in this movie that feel like when in a sitcom, the guy leaves the office, leaves the set, closes the lights, and turns around right at the doorway, and looks around one last time before closing that door behind him, just before the credits roll. The scene when Macaulay Culkin shows up to guide his dad into the afterlife is honestly genuinely tear-jerking. I'm getting a little worked up thinking about it. It's really a beautiful moment. And what's funny is this is the same horror film that inspired all the crazy Silent Hill monsters. The hospital scene in Jacob's Ladder is genuinely disturbing, but like the ending recontextualizes it. You know why they're doing that. It's not to hurt him, it's to help him, but just in a way that's misguided. Maybe.
If you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels, freeing you from the earth.
I've shown this movie to people who hate horror, and they almost always end up feeling a sense of affirmation of life. It's hard to articulate. It's just a beautiful film. Perhaps now for something completely different.
Santi. Por favor.
Guillermo del Toro is one of my all-time favorite directors. Del Toro has this sense about him where he turns even the sets into extensions of his characters and monsters. He understands themes so well, and he is really a fan of monsters. I think he likes monsters more than people, which I can't blame him. And while most of his films count as cozy in some way, from the beautiful grandfather-granddaughter relationship in Kronos to Crimson Peak's like immaculate super gothy vibes, The Devil's Backbone feels the most comfortable to me, despite being one of his more desolate films. It's a strange thing. I know, I'm weird, I guess. It takes place at a home for boys during the Spanish Civil War. It might be a school, it might be an orphanage. I haven't seen it in a while, so I forget the specifics, and I don't feel like looking it up. One of the darkest periods in Spain's history. And actually, it's funny, it takes place in the same period as Pan's Labyrinth, and some of the characters do briefly cross over in Pan's Labyrinth. There's a couple of the rebel soldiers who are... watch Pan's Labyrinth. That's another one that's amazing. So Devil's Backbone has almost like Goonies vibes, if it as told through a really serious drama. Kids come together, they see something mysterious, and uncover something a little too dark for them that they make the most of. And yeah, it's very serious. There's a lot of elements of human tragedy. There's the ghost of a young boy, and what happens to him is he gets on the head, and he is dumped in the water in the basement. And so when he walks around, there's the blood dispersing as though it's going through water, and it's almost like a field, a cloud around him. But it gets that vibe of like kids sharing a ghost story and realizing there's some elements of truth to that story. And it's haunting and it's melancholic, but there's a coziness to it. I think the best ghost stories are the ones that make you cry more than shiver. And ghosts are just these sad, lonely beings. And any movie where the humans show empathy towards these departed spirits and listen to the spirits of the departed, it hits the vibe right. And this movie does that. Again, this is a movie where the monster is, quote unquote, is far more sympathetic than the humans. And there is a human villain in this that's, you know. Anyway, speaking of ghost stories, though.
Many films will frighten you, but only a few can really terrify you. The Changeling, an experience beyond total fear.
I've mentioned The Changeling several times on this channel, and I'm going to continue to mention it because it's incredible. It's one of the greatest ghost stories ever, in my opinion, but there's something about this film that I find super cozy, despite the sadness. The film focuses on George C. Scott, and he's this famous composer who unfortunately has just lost his wife and child in this horrible accident. He's relocating from New York City to this college city, I guess it's the countryside, I'm not exactly sure where it's located exactly. And a lot of ghost stories focus people moving into a creepy old house, but I don't know, I kind of love the house that George C. Scott moves into. It's supposed to be creepy, but it's like a really nice estate. It's got that old-fashioned wood paneling and a barn-style garage you have to get out of the car to open up. I don't know, it's inconvenient, but I love it. And all those bookshelves and the wall and the staircase, I love this. It's so beautiful. The colors are that comforting deep brown, and it's surrounded by these beautiful trees. It feels autumnal. There's like, you can feel the chill in the air, and you can feel the warmth inside the house. It's incredible. And there's like all these bits where George C. Scott is just, you know, playing his piano, and he's just enjoying himself. It's nice. It's got that super academic vibe, is what I'm getting at. The town's historical society plays a huge role, and there are some scenes in these big, crowded lecture halls. People go to symphonies where they get poured champagne. The arts are actually celebrated and funded. Honestly, this sounds like a dream. I kind of love this. There's a mystery, of course. There's a ghost. And the whole film is about George C. Scott and his real-life wife trying to figure out the mystery and what's going on. But, you know, there's a lot of scenes where they're going into libraries and they're reading newspapers on microfilm. And it gives a cozy vibe. You know, the more I talk with this film, the more I kind of want to live in his house. I kind of want that house. It's beautiful. It really is the kind of ghost story you want to watch with a warm cup of tea. And sure, there is tragedy. There are some genuinely upsetting scenes in it, but the tragedy just puts into contrast the cozy vibes. I love this film to bits. I think it's essential viewing every Halloween. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the wave of family-friendly films that took place around Halloween or around the spooky season that became very popular during the 90s when I was growing up. This includes Addams Family, Addams Family Values, Casper the Friendly Ghost, and, of course, Hocus Pocus, all of which really embody that cozy, family-friendly vibe of Halloween. I suppose also Halloween Town kind of counts, but I honestly don't love that film, but it does have a vibe to it, which I think is kind of nice as background noise. And I know some people like that Mary-Kate and Ashley double movie. I forget the name of it. I guess that kind of counts. Oh, and of course, if we're talking about 90s spooky stuff for families, Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark, perennial classics. And maybe this is just what I watched growing up, but The Twilight Zone was consistently on around Halloween on the Sci-Fi Channel and all that, and I just absolutely adore this series. It is a masterpiece. The same can't be said for the film The Twilight Zone, the movie, because of John Landis's, shall we say, criminal liabilities while making that film, to put it mildly. Seriously, how is he not arrested for that? I genuinely am boggled by that. Anyway, moving on.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Perhaps if there was more of me to spread around.
A lot of slashers are cozy for me, but Freddy Krueger and Nightmare on Elm Street hit the mark harder than most. Growing up in the 90s, vintage MTV stuff always had this great vibe I loved. It felt mature, but there was also a lot of color to it. Nightmare on Elm Street hits that vibe perfectly. When it needs to be, it's grungy and grim, but it can also be so colorful and imaginative. When the first film is a pure horror film, but I think it's the best film by far, but 3 has the coziest vibes. It's the kind of film where you know a cast of characters, you see the strengths and weaknesses of all of them. I think I care more about what happens to the kids in the third film than the main kids in the first film, aside from Nancy, who is just incredible. Heather Langenkamp, it has to be said, is so pitch perfect as Nancy. 1 and 3 are elevated so much just by her being there. And one thing I love about 3, that a lot of slasher films have done the opposite of, is you see a final girl who returns, and she is traumatized by the first film, obviously. But you have Halloween 2018, Halloween H2O, you have the later Scream films, where the trauma hollows them out. It really makes them have a harder time to function in society. But Nancy, yeah, she's traumatized, but her instinct is to help other people through pain. She uses her trauma to help others, and I think that's really beautiful. I'm so used to now seeing these final girls come back in later films and be like these hollowed out shells, grizzled, toughened up, but Nancy showing love to these kids and genuinely wanting to help them is so beautiful. I think that's an element that people don't talk about enough with this film. Also, Morpheus is there. Yeah, I see you there. But really, these films are made with Freddy Krueger. There's no secret that New Line Cinema is sometimes called the house that Freddy built, or the house that Warner Brothers bought out and has made a Freddy Krueger film in years, but I digress. When Krueger needs to be scary, he is scary. But he's kind of like the Joker, where you're laughing and disturbed all at the same time. I think the later films get a little too jokey, but it's fine, because Freddy is so entertaining, he makes the lesser films enjoyable on some level. And yeah, I kind of love Freddy vs. Jason. It's good. I like it. It's a WWE match. It's so over the top. And a lot of Friday the 13th fans don't like it because it's more of a nightmare film than a Friday film. And yeah, I know. That's an appeal to me.
Yes, there is something I want to ask you.
All right.
How the fuck do you write so many books so fast?
Okay, this is kind of cheating, but it's my video, so who gives a fuck? Stephen King's works are super cozy. King clearly loves Maine as a state, and of all his films capture the sleepy coastal vibes of the state. Well, you're removed from the rest of the country in a way. Maine is the northmost state in the United States, so it's a little taken away from the cities like Boston or New York, but I don't know, there's something really warm about people there. Or cold, depending. Because Stephen King also fears other people. He illustrates the dangers of the crowd. But you go to Castle Rock, you go to Derry, and there is this sense of earnestness there, sincerity. It feels lived in. And of course, the fact that most of Stephen King's stories take place in one cosmology, you allow this kind of mythos to the area. I try to read a Stephen King story every Halloween, even on audiobook, even if I can. Salem's Lot, Christine, even Pet Sematary. There's this folksy vibe where you feel the chill of the outside world pressing in, but there's warmth coming from the characters. There's warmth coming from inside. And I just like that, It makes you feel like you're walking into a warm house after going out for a walk in the chilly autumn sun. I think Misery might be the most cozy of his works for me, despite, being one of his most effective. Yeah, Annie Wilkes is terrifying, but there's a warmth to be had inside that cabin of hers, with the snow piling up outside. And sure, yeah, she might break your ankles with a hammer, but hey, it's nice and cozy. I think, maybe. I mean, it's cozier than going outside in the storm. The whole story is about people coming together to oppose this force of cruelty, a petty force of cruelty. And in every version of the story, we see that friendship can bring people together and be a resistance against these isolated, lonely, evil bullies. I think the reason people hate The Shining book after seeing the film is that they expect King's work to be just as cold and alienating as Kubrick's film. And it's the fact that it's a story of redemption that really throws people off. The book is about redeeming yourself, about becoming better than what you are and overcoming your personal demons. That, I think, is something really beautiful, and I feel it's lost on a lot of people who want to be scared by The Shining. It's more a story of personal development, of King's own personal development. Okay, there's one thing that's not cozy, and that's The Jaunt. The Jaunt is terrifying. The Jaunt is, genuinely horrifying. And it's longer than you think. I think it's also worth bringing up, again, the films of Tim Burton, such as Beetlejuice and Nightmare Before Christmas. Well, let me rephrase that. Beetlejuice and a film Tim Burton wrote and produced, directed by Henry Selick, called The Nightmare Before Christmas. These are essential viewings every Halloween, I feel, because of just how good they are. So I guess I'll wrap this up with just one more cozy film. This was going to be a short video, but I do want to mention one more film. One you probably haven't actually seen, but if you have seen, then you're a real one for this.
Dreams or nightmares, madness or sanity. I don't know which is which.
Let's scare Jessica to death.
You've probably never heard of Let's Scare Jessica to Death. It's a simple concept. Couple moves into a new town. The town locals are kind of weird, and there's a big secret going on.
Jessica, I'm here, Jessica.
You know Jessica has a history with mental illness, but you're never totally sure where anything's going or what's going on.
Who are you? Why have you been following me?
What's the matter with her?
She knows who killed that man.
What man? I don't know.
Let's Scare Jessica to Death is one of those extremely surreal films from the 70s that just doesn't feel cohesive. And because it doesn't feel cohesive, it captures that dreamy vibe so well. And it's deliberate. It runs on dream logic. And the more you watch, the less sure you are of what you see. And that's really something. For me, there's something so strangely dreamlike about the film. It's slow, and it puts you in this atmosphere where you're looking at people a little too long, and their expressions are hinting at things you're not quite sure what they're saying. But the set is breezy. The homes are these open, kind of lovely little places that feel unoccupied and ready for people to stay in, but also strangely aged. It's kind of pleasant, but it's also very surreal. And it gets this haunting vibe. It's kind of like a nightmare you have as a kid, where things are happening for reasons you don't totally understand, and you feel like you're kind of on rails, like you can't stop what's coming. And you know you're in danger and need to run, but your attention is out of sync with everything else, and you feel like you're lingering in this weird locale.
I was just, looking at the picture. Looks so much like you. My eyes. Look at my eyes.
I can't really justify this one to you. It just feels, it's just neat, okay? It's deeply disorienting, but there's a coziness to the disorientation. I guess. It's weird. I'm weird. If you click on this video, you know that's what's coming. But still, if you haven't seen Let's Scare Jessica to Death, change that. Oddly enough, I actually like this pre-restoration more, where it's a little more washed out. I don't know, something with the washed out colors just hit with me more. I don't know. These are just a few cozy horror films, of course. If you haven't seen any of these before, maybe now's the time to sit down and watch a few of them this Halloween. Think about it.
I'm Vincent Price, and you're invited to my party in the house on Haunted Hill, where so far the ghosts have murdered only 7 people. So won't you come and make it 8?